Hey everyone, it's Miss Williams again, and we are ready for our next PowerPoint. This is called Solving Radical Equations. Remember, that's the square root symbol, but it's usually called a radical because you can have roots other than just square root. Okay, so the simplest kind of radical equation is one that looks like this, where you just have the variable under the radical, and it's all by itself on one side, and it's equal to some number. Okay, before we move on, let's do a little review or refresher on inverses or opposites. So when we solve equations, we know that the opposite of multiply is divide, the opposite of add is subtract, the opposite of divide is multiply, the opposite of subtract is to add. The opposite of squaring is square root, and we did that when we solved quadratics. And now we're going to do the opposite of square rooting, which is squaring. Alright? So to solve what we originally started with, the square root of x equals 5, the only thing we're going to have to do here is just to square both sides. When you square square root, it goes away. And then we all know that 5 squared is the same as 25. So your x is by itself, and x is equal to 25, and you're finished. Alright? Of course, most radical equations are not that simple. Usually there are several terms on each side of the equation. So we have a 3-step process in order to solve radical equations. The first is get the radical alone on one side of the equation. Once you do that, you can square both sides of the equation. And finally, you solve the resulting equation. It's probably a 1- or 2-step equation that you would have left to solve. So here's a pretty lengthy example. 2 plus 2 square root of x plus 1 equals 34. So obviously the square root symbol is, and the radical is not by itself. So we need to do things to get the radical by itself. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of that first 2. And we're going to do that by subtracting 2 from both sides. So when you subtract 2 from the left side, it goes away. And when you subtract 2 from the right side, 34 minus 2 is 32. Alright, still not by itself. We can't square anything yet. So we're going to have to get rid of that other 2. And since this 2 is being multiplied by the radical, we're going to need to divide both sides by 2. On the left side, it will make the 2 cancel out, and then 32 divided by 2 is 16. Finally, the radical is by itself, so we're going to square both sides, and it would look like this. When you square square root, it goes away, and 16 squared is 256. Now we just have that one more step left to do. Now we need to just solve and get x by itself. So we're going to subtract 1 from both sides, and we end up with x equals 255. Okay? Let's practice a few more. 3 more. They all kind of look the same, but they're going to have different steps. Number 1, the radical is already by itself, so the only thing I have to do is square both sides. Square square root, it goes away, and 9 squared is 81. Alright? Number 2 is different because number 2 is being added to the radical. So we're going to have to get rid of that plus 2 first by subtracting 2 from both sides. We end up with the square root of x is equal to 7. And now the square root is by itself. So we're going to square both sides. On the left side, when you square square root, it goes away. 7 squared is 49. Finally, 3 plus 2 times the square root of x equals 9. So we always get rid of the add and subtract part first, so we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. We end up with 2 times the square root of x is equal to 6. Then we need to get rid of the 2 by dividing both sides by 2. And then the square root symbol is by itself, so we square square root, square both sides. 3 squared is 9, and that's our answer. Alright? Finally, we're going to have some apply your understanding. So we're going to have some word problems that you're going to have to write the equation and then solve it. Okay? So can you find a number such that the square root of 3 less than twice the number is equal to 3? Square root of 3 less than twice the number is equal to 3. How do you do 3 less than twice the number? Less than means to subtract. Twice the number means to multiply. Is in math means equals. So here's how we write the equation. 3 less than 2 twice the number, and we're going to take the square root of all that and equal to 3. Now, the radical is already by itself, so we don't add and subtract first. First thing we're going to do is square both sides. Square and square root goes away, and 3 squared is 9. Now we have a two-step equation we need to solve, so we're going to add 3 to both sides. 2x is equal to 12. Divide both sides by 2, and you end up with x equals 6. Alright, we'll practice some more in class. I will see you soon.